Before watching this video, I advise you to review the previous two parts to understand the context. Thank you very much. Let's go back to viewing.
In the Kraken Kingdom, military service is mandatory for all residents of the kingdom and lasts for 3 years. The first 2 years it takes place in the kingdom itself and includes not only military training, but also military strategy, military history, biology, and even the study of marine races. Because soldiers need to know not only how to use weapons, but also who to use them against. In the 3rd year of service, conscripts are sent to numerous outposts to gain their first experience. Upon completion of his service, the Kraken is given the choice of either returning to civilian life or remaining in military service. If he chooses the former, he will only be able to take up arms if he is called up during the war. But if we are talking about the second option, then his whole life will be devoted to serving the kingdom until he dies at the hands of the enemy or resigns. In return, they and their family members receive military coupons, thanks to which they can receive almost any product. They are also provided with the best apartments in the kingdom. In addition, they are granted additional privileges such as immunity and the right to visit the best entertainment venues available only to a select few. Therefore, it is not surprising that 1 in 4 conscripts prefers to remain in the army. Each soldier is wearing a set of green polymetallic armor. He has a sword, a double-sided harpoon and, in rare cases, a round shield in his arsenal. There are special removable shoulder pads on the shoulder of the armor, the color of which depends on the rank. Black shoulder pads are worn by cadets, green by ordinary soldiers, blue by captains, and red by commanders. A general stands above a commander, but as a rule, this title is only worn by giant krakens and men of the royal family, for whom there is a special reinforced set of armor. But in exceptional cases, an ordinary kraken can also receive the rank of general if he has shown incredible valor and heroism or possesses unique leadership qualities, such as the ability to act outside the box in difficult situations. For several thousand years, only 20 ordinary krakens have been awarded the rank of general. Among them was Arthur Gillman. The Kraken have come a very long and eventful way, during which they played the role of both conquerors and peaceful beings. But at the same time, their ancient history and origin are shrouded in a large number of myths and legends. This is partly due to the fact that most of the information about their primitive history is classified by the Royal Ministry of Information. The only thing that is known for sure is that the Krakens are a very ancient race that originated in the North Atlantic during the pre-glacial era. In those days, the Kraken lived in small communities and led a nomadic lifestyle. After that, a large gap of several tens of thousands of years appears in the historical chronicles, after which giant kraken appear on the scene, uniting all ordinary kraken under their rule. The origin of the giant krakens is one of the biggest mysteries in underwater history, which still has no definite answer. Different races have their own versions. The mermaids believe that the krakens stole the power of their god Poseidon. The Umabozu believe that the giant krakens gained power by making a pact with evil sea spirits. And in exchange for their power, they must wage wars of conquest. The Leviathans believe that a long time ago, the Krakens found a source of divine power that turned some of them into giants. In general, there are many versions, and each of them is not supported by anything. Of course, the Krakens have their own version of the appearance of the giant Krakens, but, like others, it is impossible to confirm or deny. In addition, it is official and is considered one of the main foundations on which the power of the royal family is built, which raises questions about its bias. However, in the absence of other sources, we will have to rely on this version. So, if you ask a kraken of any age, from a child to an old man, to tell you the origin story of a giant kraken, he will not hesitate to tell you that this story began about 10,000 years ago. At that time, both the ocean and the land were overflowing with a wide variety of creatures such as dragons, cyclops, centaurs and many others. There were also primitive people among them, and the world was ruled by 2 ancient races, Titans and Atlanteans. The whole land was under the rule of the Titans, and all the seas and oceans were under the rule of the Atlanteans. At the same time, the Atlanteans themselves lived on the continent of Atlantis, the only piece of land that did not obey the Titans. This caused their discontent, but their rivalry did not cross the line for a long time. until the new leader of the Titans wanted to subjugate Atlantis by force. He created a weapon capable of resisting the Atlanteans, the Trident, and took a new name for himself, Oceanus. After that, he and the other Titans invaded Atlantis. Armed with new weapons, Oceanus and his army, suffering heavy losses, but slowly, year after year, captured one city of Atlantis after another. The Atlanteans turned to the marine life for help, but no one came to their aid. In the end, when the Titans approached the capital and there was no hope left, from somewhere at the very last moment, as in the second Lord of the Rings, help came to the besieged Atlanteans in the form of several thousand krakens. These were several large tribes united under the leadership of a crystal warrior woman. Krakens helped the Atlanteans delay Oceanus' army, which was greatly weakened by that time, and as a result, the capital of Atlantis was saved, and the Titans began to retreat. But the Oceanus, seeing its defeat, decided to prevent the victory of the Atlanteans at any cost. Using the power of the Trident, he caused the strongest tsunami in the history of Atlantis. It destroyed the mainland, the Atlanteans and Titans, as well as the Oceanus itself. The only survivors of this disaster were several hundred krakens led by Crystal, as well as the leader of the Atlanteans. Then, according to legend, the dying Atlantean, in gratitude for his devotion, granted the krakens the right to rule all the seas and oceans. He also gave Crystal his Atlantean power, which turned her into a giantess and endowed her with additional abilities. After that, Atlas died, and Crystal became the first giant kraken and the first kraken queen. In addition, all of her daughters born later, Ava and Kaya, also inherited these abilities from their mother. Thus, even after Crystal's death, her business continued its life in the person of her descendants. As for the land, after the death of all the Titans, chaos began on it, which people took advantage of, gradually displacing all other species, using their intelligence and ability to create effective murder weapons. At first, the krakens did not perceive them as a threat to themselves. But when people began to learn how to sail the seas on ships, they were seriously afraid that they would be able to destroy them, as they had destroyed other land races. And so one of Crystal's descendants issued a decree dedicated to all underwater races, not to come into contact with humans under any circumstances. But not everyone listened to this law. Many continued to actively interact with people. Therefore, krakens had to force them to submit. As you can see, this legend clearly aims to justify the power of the krakens over the ocean and their sometimes cruel treatment of other marine races. And it makes sense. The krakens believed that since the Atlantean leader had granted them the right to rule the seas, all sea races should obey them implicitly. Therefore, in order to assert their power, the krakens began to actively colonize other seas, creating new cities everywhere, which were ruled by giant krakens. Of course, they had to deal with other races during this process. And krakens, as a rule, first tried to establish contact with new species and try to persuade them to cooperate by promising them their protection, in return for recognizing the power of giant kraken. And sometimes it worked, but, in most cases, the indigenous peoples did not treat these outsiders very well and resisted them. Throughout their history, the krakens have come into contact with all underwater races, and the number of those with whom they did not fight can be counted on the fingers of one hand of an unsuccessful lumberjack. It would take a couple of hours of video to list all the wars they waged with other races, and I would love to do it, but your time is not endless, as well as the number of my pencils, so I will tell you about all this only briefly. After the power of the krakens was consolidated in the North Atlantic, they began to actively spread to other areas of the Atlantic Ocean. They headed south to the Caribbean Sea and created a new underwater city there, which was handed over to the youngest daughter of the then Kraken Queen. This marked the beginning of the Caribbean dynasty. Other groups of krakens went north to the Arctic Ocean. There they also built a city, which also came under the rule of the daughter of the Queen of the Atlantic. The Arctic dynasty appeared. Then, a couple of centuries later, they entered the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, which had previously been closed to entry due to the presence of a huge number of aggressive creatures. Especially the Leviathans, with whom krakens tried to establish contact, but this venture did not take into account a number of local traditional features, which led to a war between krakens and Leviathans. By the way, there's a video about Leviathans on the channel. If you want to see this story from the perspective of the Leviathans, then you can watch it. The war between the two species was long and brutal, but in the end, the krakens won, thanks to the rebellion of the local races previously captured by the Leviathans. But when the war ended, the krakens did not recognize their independence, which led to a new rebellion against them. This rebellion was brutally suppressed with the help of the mermaids, the only race in the Mediterranean that recognized the power of the krakens. In gratitude for this, the giant krakens gave the mermaids the freedom to surf the seas and colonize them, which will play a role in the future. Another city was built at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean dynasty appeared, Soon, after several more centuries, the Krakens also established new cities and dynasties in the southern, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. At first, these new kingdoms were weak and unstable. But gradually, the local dynasties consolidated their power over their possessions, and since they were loosely connected to each other, each Kraken's kingdom developed its own unique culture, customs, and laws that differed from each other. Although one thing remained unchanged, Queen Crystal was considered by many to be a demigod, and the Kingdom of Atlantic, which was founded by her, was perceived as the cradle of their civilization and a sign of the standard, which everyone wanted to be like. This was also said due to the fact that all dynasties, without exception, originate from the Krakens of the Atlantic. Therefore, the queens of the Atlantic Ocean have always enjoyed high prestige among other dynasties and even bore the title of the Queens of the Seven Seas, although in fact this status was only nominal and did not imply any real power. This went on for many thousands of years, until Ramona, the Queen of the Atlantic Ocean, died 100 years before the War of the Trident. She never left any heirs because of his infertility. As a result, for a while her husband took over the post of ruler of the Atlantic. An unprecedented case in the history of the Krakens. As a result, at the Council of the Seven Seas, another giant Krakens decided to place the daughter of a queen from another dynasty on the throne of the Atlantic. The debate over whose daughter would sit on the throne and inherit the title of Queen of the Seven Seas was fierce, but in the end, everyone accepted a compromise option in the person of Princess Dolores, daughter of Pearl Queen of the Caribbean. This choice was due to the fact that the Caribbean Kingdom of Kraken was founded second only to the Atlantic Kingdom. Thus, Dolores became the ruler of the Atlantic Ocean and received the title of Queen of the Seven Seas. And she became the shortest holder of this title, because just 6 months later, under pressure from her power-hungry mother, she transferred this title to her. Pearl became the only queen of 2 seas at once and the formal leader of all the others, which almost no one liked. Other queens demanded that Pearl step down and relinquish her title, to which she refused. Thus began the Kraken's Civil War, one of the most brutal and inglorious wars in the history of their species. As a result, Pearl was defeated and committed suicide, refusing to accept captivity. Her daughter Dolores gave up the title of Queen of the Caribbean in favor of her 5-year-old sister. And the daughter of the Queen of the Pacific Ocean sat on the throne of the Atlantic. Also, at the peace conference, it was decided to emulate the title of Queen of the Seven Seas. However, in 100 years, the Queen of the Pacific Ocean, Sadia, will regain this title. But for completely different reasons. The Krakens have left behind a very controversial legacy. Some races consider them defenders of the ocean without fear or reproach. Others see them only as brutal invaders, devoid of any positive features. Among humans, they are represented as monsters that sink ships and destroy sailors. Although in fact they were mistakenly confused with the royal jellyfish. You can watch a video about them. But in this 3-part series, we saw that the Kraken is neither pure good nor pure evil. Like any other biological species, they have both light and dark sides, which we should not forget about. But we should not take only one point of view as a basis and build our views and beliefs on it.